the astrological houses, and I'll be giving some little tippy tips about. I don't know why that did what it did, but anyway. So I'm gonna be not having it be blue. Hold on. Yes, astrology. And I'm going to be giving my, actually not really mine, but some little sneaky teehee tricks with this thing. And how you can actually look at it and actually figure out, let's see here. I think I'll also include medical astrology, like the astrology that also uses like the human body and anatomy. Because believe it or not, with anatomy, like the human anatomy, you can actually see where someone potentially has a disease and most prone to disease, what part of the body. So let me just click this. Let me just fling this around a little bit. Not literally, but you get the idea. And I literally throw myself all over the place, but you know what I mean, hopefully. Come on, milkshake. Come on. Because I mean, just kinky dirty. Okay. So, the houses. Now, when you're looking at an astrology chart, there are many ways that you can actually draw the chart. This is the North Indian style chart. If you have a strong Venus, this will be able to read with much simpler than a South Indian chart. And the South Indian is essentially a bunch of squares with a giant square in the middle. And depending on which square has a line through it, that's the ascendant. No matter what happens for the North Indian, that was the South Indian. North Indian, this one right here, that's always the ascendant no matter what. Doesn't matter what sign it is that's having this house, the ascendant, it's always the first house. This diamond's always the first house. There's that way. Then we have what's mainly known in the Western one. Then we have the wheel. It's the same thing. It's just drawn differently. And your first house is always at the bottom. In this case, it would be on the left. Right here. This would always be the first house right here when you're reading an astrology chart. I know it's reversed, but when it's like not reversed, it would be like over here, and then you would be going this way. You'll be going counterclockwise, not clockwise. So to kick it off, you see the first house, the one right here. Usually that is normally known as the sign of Aries. And Aries is the one that rules the physical body. And that's what the first house is, the ascendant. It also represents, funny enough, also your head. In medical astrology, that's your head. And also your thought, your brain. So depending on what sign is ruling the first house or is in the first house, that shows that this ascendant is being influenced by this zodiac sign. For example, if you have a Cancer ascendant, somebody has on their mind and in their head all the time the need to nurture something, caretake to something, raise something, protect something, provide for something, provide security for something, nurture something. That's always a reoccurring theme in their head. If you have a Capricorn ascendant, pretty much what goes along in your mind is fear and anxiety and trying to obtain a status, where you're trying to keep yourself in the best shape possible. You're trying to put out a good image to have a good status and a good standing. Now let's say if you happen to have a Virgo ascendant, pretty much in your mind is you're trying to perfect everything. You're so harsh on yourself and everything around you that the primary thought is that you're trying to make something like picture perfect and you're so critical of yourself. That's just an example. And also, again, the first house, that's the head. right here. Second house, that's Taurus, ruled by Venus. First house, and we're going by like if this was Aries, Taurus, Gemini, yeah, you get the idea. So this would be ruled by Mars, since it's Aries. Taurus, for the second house. So the second house is your fixed assets, pretty much your senses, all the physical senses, sight, smell, taste, touch, hear, but not like intuitive. No, not that one. And the second house also rules your face. This is Taurus, and as well as the vocal cords. Not the third house, not like the with communication, the tone of the voice. That's the second house. It's also it can also be your family and how you're upraised, your kind of just taste of food, and it also second house can also influence the tongue. Yeah. And sense of smell, sight, as well as hearing. Essentially, the second house, Taurus, is all the senses. So if you have, let's say if you put in Pisces in there, in the second house, potentially you actually might have a craving for food that has a taste that's very mysterious, or the tone of voice. That's all those are your sun signs, if you're going at it that way. But if you have like Pisces in your second house as your second house ruler, that shows that the way that you speak, the tone of voice you speak, can be kind of lost. It can be very mesmerizing. It can be very intoxicating. It can be very imaginative. It can be very woozy-wooey. And again, second house rules the face, throat, by the tone of voice, not the words. That's third. Third house. Well, actually, it'd be counterclockwise, so it'd be going this way. Why the heck did it... I've had to get used to going it this way, but so, third house right here. So third house, because again, this is reversed. On the screen, it's reversed, but it's supposed to be the other way around. But anyway, third house. Third house represents your communications. What is this message retracted thing? I'm trying to figure out what the heck that's supposed to mean, because it's really agitating me. Hello, Lilith. Okay. Now, as I was saying, so the third house, it rules the arms, the hands, the phalanges. It also rules like the arm all the way up to the shoulder. It also rules the lungs, like lungs, and stops there. And the third house, being the natural house of Gemini, is over communications, interactions with others. It's also a house of your skills, like if you're able to be a writer, a singer, anything that you can actually exercise and pretty much gain a better understanding, because it's one of the houses that grows with time and effort put into it. And usually it's also one of the houses of desire. There's a total of 3 houses for desire: 3rd, 7th, 11th. Those are the houses of desire. And funny enough, those are air signs. Now the 4th house. The 4th house is the sign of Cancer. The sign of Cancer is a sign that is very... Oh, and the 3rd is also naturally ruled by Mercury. 4th house. 4th house is whenever you look at the 4th house, no matter what sign is there, that sign is influencing somebody's mother. So for an example, if you happen to have a Capricorn in the 4th house, mother is a very strict disciplinarian person. Orderly structure, always wants to make sure that there's a status involved in the family. She can be strict, she can be very disciplinary. She likes order, structure, and having order in the home. But also 4th house is also the house of security, also the house of mental peace. It's also conveniency, like air conditioners, vehicles. It's as well, funny enough, a lot of people don't know this one. The 4th house is also representation of the heart. That's the 4th house. And the fourth house on the body is actually the chest. This is the fourth house. And also, if fourth house is damaged, like for an example, if you have a really not so well placed planet in the fourth house, like an example, if you have Mars in Cancer in the fourth, you can actually have potentially somebody's mother being very abusive. It has potential. It's just potential. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. But also, since having Mars in the fourth, they can also, their mother figure can be very hostile to the spouse figure, and also kind of protect the spouse figure more than the native. It just has potential. But also keep in mind now, in astrology, if you have Lilith in the fourth house, that's a good thing, because Lilith being in the fourth, that's one of the indications that Lilith actually becomes part of this native and actually helping them become more comfortable with the darker parts of themselves. And also in the fourth house, Lilith is familiar with it because she's in the house ruled by Moon, so she's already comfortable. So she's like, okay, I know this place. And also, while I'm thinking about it, when you have in the fourth house like a benefic like Venus, mother gets influenced by any planet that's sitting in the fourth. Be it good, bad, dreadful, don't matter. And again, it rules the heart and the chest. Fifth house, at the house of Leo. The fifth house represents pretty much your creative self-expression, romance, theatrics, gambling, speculative gains, stock market, political interest. It's also kind of like shortly after the high school. And fourth house is also elementary to middle school. Fifth house is kind of like high school and then slightly after that. And the fifth house is actually the diaphragm and slightly below to like right in here. It's kind of like the midpoint. There's also inwardly the soul. And also the fifth house can be seen as the house of father. Not the teachings of the father, because that's the ninth. Sixth house. Sixth house is one of the malefic houses, because the sixth house shows the kind of work that you're going to be doing or the opposition that you have to deal with every single day throughout your life. Depending on which planet ruling this house is, pretty much that sign's influence and the planet becomes a functional malefic. If you have a planet ruling the 6th, 8th, 12th, it is a functional malefic. But there's a bit of a twist with it. If you happen to have a planet ruling one of these, the 6th, 8th, or 12th, but also at the same time they also rule one of the Kendras, 1, 4, 7, 10. If you have it rule one of those houses, and if it rules 6, 8, or 12, it pretty much loses its malefic effect. That's a bit advanced, but just so that we know. So the sixth house is pretty much the house of poverty. It's the house of small animals, pets. It's also the house of everyday work and service to people. It's essentially a war zone. It's everyday struggle. It's disease, illness, plagues. It also represents, this one might be a bit of a dark one. It's also the one that represents, I don't even know how I should say it. It also represents the mortuary. Because you have to go in and actually clean something that is mortifying. And that could be something somebody has to deal with on the daily. But it can also be in the 8th too, because it deals with death. And the 6th house in the body, it's the intestines and the stomach tract, digestive system. Now the 7th house, and this one is Mercury, Sun, Moon, Gemini. Gemini, that's Mercury too. Virgo, that's Mercury. 7th house. 7th house is partnership, spouse figure, romantic and duty, contracts, negotiations, and marketplace. 7th house also represents like a street, roadway. And just like Libra, the way that it actually is symbolized on the body is the hips, and then slightly downward at the hips. And but now here's the thing. If you have Black Moon Lilith in the 6th house, pretty much, and also 6th house is also enemies. So if you have Lilith in the 6th house, Lilith becomes your enemy. That's actually one of the dangerous places to have Lilith, because your enemy now intakes the Lilith, and your sense of empowerment comes from suffering, which really doesn't make sense. And also your enemies also have it, yeah. And having Lilith in the 6th house, that also shows potential that Lilith starts pretty much becoming one who causes obstacles to you. And she makes you suffer in the 6th house. Actually, it's this one. And 7th house, the house of contracts, commitments, negotiations, pacts, agreements. And it's also the house where the planet Sun falls the weakest, because the Sun has to be negotiating. The king doesn't. Excuse me. The king doesn't like negotiating. When you put him in the place where he's the marketplace, he's being forced to negotiate, but the king wants to do what he wants. Not here. And that's where Venus rules. Same thing with the 2nd. And that's Venus ruling that. The 8th house, that ruled by Scorpio. And Scorpio, funny enough, has the most planets ruling it. Mars, Pluto, South Node K2, and Black Moon Lilith. They rule the sign of Scorpio. And also, yes, of course, fine, we'll go with it. In anatomy astrology, the Scorpio represents the sticking or catching part, if you catch my drift. That's nasty part. And if there's damage in the 8th house, well, somebody could have issues there, trying to stick or catch it. That's just how it is. The 8th house, though, is the house of the unknown. It's random events, sudden change. It also represents transformation, death, occult science, occult magic practice. It also represents hidden gems, stuff underground, secrecy, assassinations. That's the 8th house. And it's also ruled first by Mars. But also, the sign of Scorpio, believe it or not, the sign of Scorpio is the most committed and the most devoted. There is no other sign that can compete in terms of devotion than Scorpio. Because Scorpio is able to overkill, like with love. It can be benefic or damaging. Benefic is unconditional love. And the malefic side is like obsession, to the point where someone becomes a little bit out of bounds, if you catch my drift. That's the 8th house. Now we're scooching over then to the 9th house. The 9th house, Sagittarius, is pretty much symbolized by, actually, it's the house on the body that is your thighs, upper thighs, all the way down to the kneecaps, and also the tush part. And that's pretty much the house of higher education, philosophy, moralistic thinking, long distance travel, pilgrimage, higher thinking, inspiration. It's also the house of guru, teacher, and also teachings of the Father. And that's because Scorpio and Aquarius, they're fixed. And if a sign is interacting with a fixed sign, it kind of understands it slightly. But Sagittarius is the sign of higher knowledge, higher education, philosophy, higher forms of communication, like speaking for divinity. It's also sacred texts, historical texts, and study of higher subjects. And that's ruled by Jupiter. Scooching over to the 10th house. The 10th house is essentially the part of the sky that's like right above your head. And if everybody can see the 10th house. So if you have, let's say for an example, if you have, if you put Black Moon Lilith in the 10th house. That's actually that's a very good spot to have Lilith, because Lilith is a being that loves being adored and loves being appreciated. She loves being, well, she likes knowing that people are looking up at her, because the 10th house is above, they have to look up. And pretty much the 10th house is somebody's status and standing. In medical astrology and anatomy astrology, it represents your kneecaps and your patella. Because with the knees, that makes you stand. If you have weak knees, you ain't gonna stand. But in the 10th, that's your status, your reputation, your pretty much servitude that you do, that pretty much you provide for the society. Not the 6th. The 6th is something you have to deal with on the daily. This is like your career choice, or like your chosen acts of service to do. And also, Capricorn ruling this. Capricorn also has one unique thing about it that no other sign has. Every other sign, yeah, Scorpio is, like I said, is the sign that actually has dominion over assassinations. That's a sudden change. But unlike any other sign, Capricorn has one advantage. In all these signs, except Capricorn, they have a total of 3 nakshatras or constellations in them. But that also spill into another sign that they have potential to. But Capricorn, instead of having 3, it has 4. 4 constellations in it. That being said, Capricorn has the most potential to actually have like the most qualities be put into it. And since Capricorn, well, there's 2 ways that Capricorn is actually depicted. Capricorn is depicted as of course, there's the seagull. Lilith in Capricorn, that's a good thing. Depending on the degree. If you have her in, let's see, I'm going to try to remember at the top of my head. From degrees 6 to 14, I believe. If you have her at least between those degree points, you have Lilith in Abjit. And when you put Lilith in an Abjit, pretty much somebody's sense of empowerment is always victorious. And the way that they seduce others is by pretty much showing that they're going to be successful. Like the person who has Lilith in that position, that, look, I'm going to be successful and I'm going to win this. If you like it, cute. Not, well, out of the way. Okay. And also, Abjit is the most supreme constellation or nakshatra point. Lilith there, she gets her empowerment by being the most supreme. And she becomes victorious in how she exists. And she just exists, and she's just like, well, I'm already victorious, so why am I going to give a crap if someone doesn't like me? Oh, trauma? No. No. Oh, I have to do what? No. No. That, I already have it. No, we don't even have it yet. I already have it, dude. You don't have it? You don't. I do have it. No. I have it already. But you don't. Well, if you blink the next 2 seconds, you'll see that I have it. 1, 2. Oh, look at that. Got it. But now that person's out of the way. No, so it really just depends how other things are placed too, because just having one placement that doesn't really provide much. You need to have the whole thing be put out there. 11th house, Aquarius. 11th house is network circle. It's your communications to the world at large. It's your progressive thinking. It's your humanitarian side. Excuse me. It also represents your thigh down to your ankle. Is ruled by these planets. Saturn. Okay, don't mind that in the background. It's ruled by Saturn, Rahu, or the North Node, and Uranus. And when it comes to the one who has the most pull and the most ownership, it is Saturn. It's not Uranus, it's Saturn. Saturn first. Well, hold on. again. Shh. So anyway, Aquarius is the ruling of the ankles, and it's also the actually, let's see. I'm gonna try something new. Hold on. To hopefully, and hopefully, maybe you won't be getting some interference on the other side because it's getting kind of annoying. Yeah, because I don't know why in the world. Hold on. Can you still hear me? Yay, nay, meh. I hope so, because this way, I don't have to worry about, kinky. I don't have to worry about any interference because now the mic's right here next to my mouth. And that way I won't get distracted. Extremely clearly, perfect, good. That way, you won't be having, saw that behind me. Nice try. The only thing that I don't like about this is because I kind of feel like, wow, how come I'm not, like playing a game at the same time? But that's just me. But whatever. I also feel like I'm working at like a fast food restaurant wearing this thing on top of my head. But whatever. Who cares, right? But anyway, if it was much quieter, yeah. But anyway, so the 11th Lilith in 17 degrees. So that would be you have Lilith in Sardavana. That means pretty much your sense of empowerment comes by listening to people and also being practical and giving advice. Pretty much you feel empowered by allowing people to express themselves and you're able to kind of help them organize their thoughts. You feel the most empowered doing that. And also that part of Capricorn is like the psychologist. He's also, funny enough, it being in the probably most likely the third pada, you pretty much like you get a sense of empowerment by nourishing people and pretty much communicating on how vital it is that people are able to express their mental health when it's needed. Anyway, back to Aquarius. So Aquarius for the 11th house. Aquarius is, funny enough, the most chaotic sign. It's the most unpredictable because it's fixed air. When you put fixed air in a container, the air goes back and forth, and it's just going to keep going until it shatters because you can't constrict air that much. Gee. And the 11th house is the... And actually, that was just reading just for your... Hi, Rusty. And actually, funny enough, that was just me reading on just one position, just your Black Moon Lilith. Just by having that one placement. That's what stuff. But 11th house. That's your hopes, wishes, desires, your network circle, your friends. It's pretty much your... It's also the connection to the other side in spirit. It's also Aquarius is the highest sign out of all of them. It's because you're taking the spiritual aspect and the intelligence and you're merging them together. Because again, Aquarius is the water sign, but it also behaves like the sign of Cancer. Aquarius has the same behavior as Cancer. But the thing is, Cancer protects the family, Aquarius protects society and everyone as a whole. This one's more of the self, this one is more for everybody else. And that's your ankles. Last but not least, the sign of Pisces, the fishes. 12th house is one of the malefic houses. It's the most gentle out of the three. The most cruel is the 8th, because you don't know what's going to happen. This one's the middle. This one is the most gentle. 12th house is the house of loss, the house of Isolation is also the house of being imprisoned, jailed, put into an insane asylum. It's your being cut off in the world. It's by yourself in the wilderness. 12th house is the sign of Pisces too. It's also the house of malefic, as in meaning houses that are malefic or anything that's termed malefic is something that brings hardship, challenges, or makes or disturbs one's being, if that makes sense, and causes some kind of strife. It doesn't mean that it's good or bad. It just brings challenges and things that have to be overcome. Like for example, if you put Saturn in the 8th house, you're putting a planet that's all about restriction in the 8th. You actually have somebody being restricted from encountering death experiences. They can cheat death with that placement. They have potential to. Believe it or not. Same thing if you have Saturn in the 6th. Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, Pisces, well, I mean, I was actually getting to that. The 12th house, also funny enough, rules the feet. Because that's in the body, that's the feet. Pisces is a sign of intoxication. By being intoxicated, when you take a sip, excuse me, when you take a sip of water, even by just a simple drink of this, you're being intoxicated by water. Your perspective changes. That's the 12th perspective. And also the 12th house is also the house of path working, like the astral projection. It's also the house of donations, losses. It's also the house of escapism. If you want to escape, you have to go by means of the 12th house. But if you have somebody's moon in the 12th house, that shows that their sense of stability comes by being isolated. It also comes in by donating time to somebody else. It also shows they feel the most full being alone, but they also need to be nourished alone. And their sense of being grounded has to be by themselves and they have to recharge alone. That can also show a sign of somebody having sensory overload. And pretty much those are the houses. And now the little fun fact. Okay, so we have, let's do it this way. Aries, Leo, Sagittarius. That triangle. That's your Dharma triangle. And those are all fire signs. And now the houses about your 3D fixed assets wealth, 2nd, 6th, and 10th. Those are your earth signs. Those are the ones that have those are the ones that affect the mundane world the most. And then we have the air signs. 3rd, Gemini, 7th, Libra, Aquarius, 11th. Those are your signs, houses of desire. Those are your air signs. Desire comes from a thought. And then you have, last but not least, the moksha triangle. 4, 8th, 12th. That triangle right there. Those are your water signs. And those are your signs that are considered the moksha giving placements. You need Divine Mother to prevent and keep you nourished to withstand the sudden change. So then once you sustain surviving the change, that's when you can escape. Escape pretty much your sense of comfort. Go through the transformation, and then you can escape. That's how that triangle works. And funny enough, all those triangles, I just went through every single house, just by element, just like that. And also, so that way you know. That way I can nip this in the butt. Before someone comes in, it's just so like, well, what about this sign? No. As an example, every single house is 30 degrees long. Every single house. I don't care what system you're using, every single house is 30 degrees long. Because when you have when you have a sign ruling 2 houses, that's a problem. Because now when you have, essentially you're going to be having 4 houses pretty much being off kilter. You're going to have a sign ruling 2 houses, and then you're going to have another one doing it too. Then you're taking out 2 zodiac signs. When you do that, and you have a planet placed in a sign, but not in that house, you have a void planet. When a planet is void, it has no influence. It does not bring any kind of, it doesn't bring you anything. And a good example is I knew somebody who had a void Scorpio sun. He does not like being alive. He doesn't feel like why he's alive. He doesn't have a sense of self. And that's not good. Having no sense of self, that is prone to actually wanting to end yourself. And he was pretty prone to that. That's just how it is. And in his placement, he had a void sun. And it is what it is. But when you put it in for 30 degrees long, that's when you actually get the wheel. Because a full circle is 360 degrees. Each house. Clever Nightshade, very clever. Yeah, that's true. I don't get along with them either because really technically it doesn't count. But anyway, each house and sign is 30 degrees long. Okay, perfect. That being said, it makes a full circle. 12 times 30 is 360. Full circle, 360 degrees. The theories of adding the 13th and 14th sign, well, here's the thing. When you have 360, a full circle, what happens when you add another 30 degrees? 360, okay, now you're at 390. But we can't put it in the circle because there's no room. And then we have it go then for some people thinking that there's a 14th one, but funny enough, 390, there's your 420. Very clever. Somebody just wanted to have 420 be part of astrology. Very clever, but no. No. Because now you have 2 signs and now 2 extra houses that have to be included. Now they're just lingering right here. No. That's mathematical. 360, that's mathematics. You really can't combat and argue mathematics. And that's why astrology is considered a science, because you have to be able to calculate. Yep. Use numbers to calculate the distance, placement, and when you want to be extra fancy and start doing divisional charts and actually cutting this thing into bits, you have to know how to divide. And you have to know when to start dividing each specific house. Because when you do that with divisional charts, you can actually see how somebody's married life is going to be, how their work life is going to be, how their sense and connection to deity is going to be, what illnesses they're going to be being affected by, how they treat women. That's another one you can actually see by a divisional chart, and that would be the D30. And also that's the same divisional chart that you can actually see the character of a woman. That's just how it is. There's also the D11, which is the chart of wealth and gains. Keep in mind, that's just your sun sign. Because really, if you really want to actually see if you're really compatible with someone, and specifically though, depending again, just how everything gets laid out. Because there's 2, what the heck, dude? There's 2 specific, how was I going to put this? If you're going to be reading it like with the northern placements, which I do, and if you actually want to actually do divisional charts, you can. You just got to change the, crap, I'm going to try and pronounce it. The Ayanamasha? That's how I pronounce it. But other than that, I mean, really, that's pretty much what I got with the houses, and pretty much as far as I'm going to go. But if somebody would like, just to have like one astrological question answered, just put your date of birth, birth time, and birthplace. Just fling it at me, and I'll answer. I'll say 2. I'll answer 2 questions for 2 people. I just need to know birthplace, birth time, and birth date. I don't know why I just drew a blank there, but okay, we have one for Rusty. Okay, Rusty, so what's your birth date, birth time, and birthplace? If you don't know the birth time, okay, so, whoops, okay. July, that was, no, not that one, you dingus. Bloody, go backwards. 46. If you don't know the time, we can actually figure that one out, funny enough. Okay, so then we go. We will go there. And now we're going to go down to here, hit that. Okay, so Rusty, what do you want me to look into? Anywhere where you deem fit. And do you want me to use Vedic or Western placements? Or do you want me just to go with what I got in front of me as of now? Hmm. Your first house for like how you stand for like essentially like how like your overall self, like self awareness and things like that, like health. Okay. Well, first off, right off the bat, by any chance, do you really have the constant thought of trying to want to make yourself be respected, looked up to? Do you want to hold a standing in society that a lot of people look up to? Do you always try and find a way to better yourself to the point where you get so anxious that you probably messed up something? And do you also fear that all that you worked for can be taken away just like that? And sometimes it can get to the point where you become obsessed trying to make sure everything was a-okay? And are you kind of wanting to make sure that your appearance is up to par? And you always have this kind of fear of not living up to your own standards and that you're expected to put out at a higher expectation? And do you hold yourself to high standards? By any chance, was your mother someone who was very like impulsive? Is your mother very aggressive? Does she have a lot of energy to her? Is she very swift? And is she potentially do you happen to have anywhere on your face a dark spot? Kind of like she's childlike? Like she kind of behaves very like kind of like a child? Like an innocent like child, like always optimistic and very kind of like she's Okay. Do people also, whenever you speak, do people kind of struggle understanding you sometimes? Like the way you communicate, do people not understand? Like if you speak, like whenever you talk, some people are just like, what? Yeah. Hmm. Do you feel the most secure and the most grounded and the most, like the most full when people, whenever somebody actually gives you recognition on something that was very sudden? Like, for example, if you come across a situation where you're put on the spot just out of nowhere, and if you handle it well, do you actually feel, do you feel more grounded when you take charge and know that you have nothing more to worry about in a situation like a sudden accident? Do you feel the most full when you take control of it? Like if you maintain structure and people give you recognition when handling it? Pretty much you whenever something, yeah, because that's your moon. And by one of, and also one of the things do you like to communicate about? Does it happen to be something regarding, pretty much you like honing or talking about the, pretty much you like talking about and teaching others about the heritage of other cultures and like the ancestors of the other cultures. So do you happen to like, do you get a little bit enthused when you talk about people's heritage, like their heritage and their place of origin? Like for example, if you're talking to like an American native and they're conversing about like how their great grandmother was, does that kind of like get you like more energized? And do you feel more zestful? Yep. Up, yeah, because you have, yeah, because you have Mercury in Leo with Moon, and so you get, yeah. And I'm gonna pick one last little part. Let's see. Hmm. Pretty much when you have enemies, do you sometimes feel like most of the time people that become your enemy, they usually are two-faced? Meaning that one minute they try and be very nice and want to connect with you, and then just at the very sudden next second, they backstab you, and they're unpredictable. And kind of immature too. Do you sometimes feel that, wow, I'm this kid is trying to compete with me? Do you also have lung problems? Like, do you have trouble breathing at times? And do you also have a struggle with, you also have trouble like expressing and pretty much, like, do you sometimes feel that your senses aren't really picking up as much as they should? Like, mm-hmm, yep. Because funny enough, you have the exact same Jupiter as I do. Funny enough, Jupiter in Virgo. Funny enough, also pretty close to the same ascendant as I do, in Vedic at least. Yeah. Make sure when it comes to your spirituality, make sure you have a make sure you have a divine such as Lucifer or a Venusian divine. Make sure you have one. And I'm saying like by should I mean you need to. That could be Lucifer, Aphrodite, Venus, Adonis, Hathor, Freya. Yeah, have a count. Any divine of Venus, make sure you have. Because looking at your D24, your house, I mean, not house, your chart of religious studies, pilgrimage, connection to deity, you have Venus in the Lugna of that chart, or the ascendant, showing that Venus has to be a focus. As well in Leo, that shows that your religious practice and your higher spiritual practice has to have Venus being the spotlight. So if you have it be like Adonis or Aphrodite, Venus, or any, well, in the spiritual world, in your spiritual studies, you need to have Venus be there. But also, when you have Rahu, now I'm talking about your main chart, your Rasi D1. You having Rahu in the ascendant or the Lugna, the first house. You can kind of see that somebody becomes really overblown of themselves. They like putting themselves on a high standing. And they become very really focused on the self and they want to improve the self to the point where they can become a bit like holding themselves into a high standing, like really high standing, especially Capricorn. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with having confidence. Nothing wrong with that. Because the thing is, if you have confidence, even if it's overblown, you're able to pretty much have like everlasting fire, everlasting willpower in dealing with whatever comes your way. That's a good thing. But still, now having Rahu in the first, and then now you have K2 in the seventh, that can kind of show that potentially you can be kind of meh towards people sometimes. But because you have Venus and Sun there, I mean, right off the bat, um, let's see here. Hold on. Let me just double check real quick. Okay, Venus is safe. No planetary war. That's okay. That's kinky. That's perfect. Okay. Your yogi planet. Wait. Yeah, having K2 in the the seventh house, that kind of makes you feel meh with it. And it being Cancer, you're kind of meh towards giving your emotional, vulnerable side to people. Anyway, but yes, hey Dottie. And now your Yogi planet and your Avayogi planet. Now, the Yogi planet is essentially if you go towards this planet, no matter what happens, it's going to give you supportive and it's always going to benefit you always. If you go towards the Avayogi planet, it's always going to throw hardship at you. In this case, your Yogi planet is Jupiter. So going towards anything regarding Jupiter in this case, if you go and try and perfect your moralistic thinking, if you try and organize and kind of combat for higher moral teachings and studies, and if you provide service by acting on behalf of a certain deity or divinity or religious practice, or if you advocate for them, that's going to help. That's going to bring you just like blessings of support from divinity. Because since you're going towards Jupiter in the ninth house in the sign of Virgo, when you actually critique people and actually teach them to kind of perfect their way of thinking, you're going to be getting support with that no matter what. But now the Aviyogi being Sun, whenever you're going to be egotistical about someone else, in the way like saying that this person may be very baneful, well not really baneful, like if you become overblown, vain, and very egotistical about having real confidence in someone else, that's going to cripple you because Sun is your Avayogi. And Avayogi, no matter what happens, you'll always get thrown hardships from it. So try your best to kind of stay a little bit away from like overblowing somebody else. Just keep, well, technically overblowing you. And at least that's what I got. Oh, that reminds me, I kind of have to. I'd have released those other tarot readings that I did earlier, too. And specifically in your case, it should always be put yourself first. If somebody doesn't like it, oh God forbid, they don't like me taking care of myself, oh God forbid. They're just mad because I'm trying to do what they can't do. Still, put yourself first, because if you can't put yourself first, how can you stand? Oh, and sometimes, yes, Nightshade. Sometimes it can, yes. But also, Rusty, one last observation while I'm looking at this. By any chance, did you ever have a near-death experience? Like you could have been dead? Like a sudden, almost fatal event happened, but you dodged it, survived it, or pretty much just against all odds just came out like nothing happened? I'm kind of curious to see if this one is true. But it's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Because you have Saturn looking at the 8th house from the 2nd. And whenever Saturn is influencing the 8th house, he pretty much locks it down. So pretty much it shows that if you're ever coming into a situation where things can get out of control, you're always able to keep yourself grounded and pretty much on the ground and not pretty much lose control of the self. But also, you may, like the tone of voice you used, it may be very short and straight to the point. It's not very woozy-wooey, if that makes sense. But now, Nightshade, you're up now. So what is your info, Missy? Absolutely. Okay, 7 to 8, 5. Okay, so we'll go with, whoops, we'll go with that. And we'll go with this, there, and then, whoops. And now that is, okay. Well, we're not in the States no more, so we're gonna go Nope. Wait. Nova Scotia. What are? Because I'm not seeing it. Wait. What other country is close to Nova Scotia? Whichever one. Because I'm trying to see if I can find it and I'm not seeing it pop up. In my system, at least. Canada. Okay. So we'll just go like this. Come on. There we go. Got it. Okay, we're good. Ooh, that's beautiful. Oh, wow. Oh, that's good. That's really good. Oh, my Lord Lanta. Wow. That's good. Wow. Oh, that's really good right there. Yeah, no. Good Lord Lanta. Huh. Not bad. Don't have anything there. What about over here? Okay. All right. Well, I can tell you this. You have one. Yeah, you have a total of 2 planets exalted. And pretty much when you have a planet in exaltation, essentially that planet is behaving in its highest dignity. Essentially, pretty much it's like overpowered. And those planets are Mars and Venus. And Venus is, for you, a Yogacaraka. And just like how Rusty also has Venus as a Yogacaraka. And a Yogacaraka is a planet that has to be either Mars, Venus, or Saturn. And when you have a Yogacaraka planet, that planet becomes really potent and powerful. It's a good thing. You don't have to do not apologize for having an exalted planet. Especially how this is placed. I mean, no. No, don't apologize. Flaunt it. Because because looking at this, in your mind, do you always think that you have to be taking a lot more action and trying to maintain a status or a standing? Do you feel like you're always thinking that you need to take action to hold a standing, or pretty much your sense of like putting out your energy and how you exert yourself, you're very calculated, if that makes sense. You know how to take physical action, but you're very calculative with it. And you understand how to have self restraint. hmm Do you feel the most? Do you feel like you learn the most and you gain the most wisdom in solitude? And do you feel like you learn better in solidation, like by yourself? Perfect. When it comes to religious studies, higher forms of thinking, philosophy, pretty much traditional ways of religion, do you feel kind of meh with it? Like, for an example, the Quran, meh with it. Bible, meh with it. You feel just so detached from it, you're just like, meh with it. Yep. You have K2 there. And also, when you're interacting with stuff like that, or looking at things like that, you feel so detached from it to the point where you like criticizing it and nitpicking it. And because of that, and because of you going meh with it, most of the time most of your opposition and your obstacles tend to be people that are in religious standings. And also those that teach very strictly religiously, you kind of feel meh towards them and you feel like they're your most, and they're where most of your excuse me, that's where most of your challenges come from. And you also have the need to communicate with people about and going on short walks. Do you feel like most of the time you feel the most, yeah. And when you go on walks, you actually are able to see a more deeper side of life. Like whenever you go on a walk, you can just get lost in it. Like just on a short walk, you just look around, and then you can just see the beauty and everything. Like if you're walking outside, comparing to like looking at a live stream, if you're actually there walking, you actually feel like your senses are more heightened. Well, you have Venus in there. So Venus is actually someone who is the planet that pulls people out of death. So yes. Of course. Because Venus, funny enough, is a planet that people don't really know its full potential. Because Venus is much more than just a beauty planet. By any chance, did you also have any kind of near-death experience happen? Or anything involving your sense of creative expression? Has there ever been an incident where you could have Venus and Leo? One finds beauty in being able to creatively express themselves. And also one loves and finds the most. Actually, I'm gonna do a quick technique just for Nightshade. I'm gonna do one of the techniques that actually is shown. Well, but the thing is, you have Saturn in your 8th house, so that shows no matter what happens, if something is going to be transforming, you're still going to survive, no matter what happens. And since your sun is in Aquarius, in the 2nd house, looking right at your 8th house, where Saturn's at, Saturn's looking back at Sun in Aquarius, where they both own. So you actually have a yoga that shows the planets swapping their signs, and they're actually being able to connect to one another, and also by mutual aspect. So pretty much you get really a sense of fulfillment by actually being able to connect to people and exchange ideas of beauty, and also exchange how you like to experience your senses. Well, but still, you have Sun actually looking at your 8th house protecting you, along with Saturn. So you can be, for For no matter what happens, death won't take you. It just will not take you. Especially having Saturn in the 8th. Well, I mean, for goodness sakes. Mother figure was also somebody very warlike, very aggressive, very harsh, and kind of very, how do I put this? She was somebody who was kind of like a general. Oh, here's another one. Oh. Yeah. Now here's another one. Do you feel the most full pretty much conversing with your friends about stuff that is underground, the dark, or occultic? Do you like talking to things with other people in your network circle that are usually kind of seen as like, that's a bit dark? Like also talking about occult stuff? But you gotta keep in mind, your network circle. Don't be thinking like, acquaintances, because that's the third house. These are like the people that you connect to and stay connected to. Yep, and also the occult is where you feel full. You feel the most secure. And it's also when you're communicating with other people about it, you feel extra secure. You feel stable. Well, the thing is to be technical. Well, I mean, I hate to say this too, but to be technical, the practicing and praying to like God Himself, that's a cult. That's occultic. Because the Psalms, funny enough, they're actually magical spells. They're written spells. Whoops. Don't look at me. That's just how it's written. In fact, you know what? Well, I'm thinking about it. Well, because she's following the he who font way. He who font. Meaning that you have to believe it like this or you're going to hell. Well, that's not very godly now, is it? I don't think you're supposed to teach by intimidating people. But that's none of my business. I think, I think she would, I think she should meet this. Well, it's not really a divine, but, it's someone who's aligned on the left. I think she would actually get a kick out of this one. Let me find him. There he is. I think, she would actually enjoy Safan. I think she should meet this little guy. Funny enough, Safan, he actually made a joke about heaven. You know what he said? I think it would be pretty amazing and just the sight to watch heaven burn. No joke. That's exactly what I said. Wouldn't it be just swell just to watch it burn? Yep, and that's how, he got. Oh, come on, it was a joke. Jeez, it kind of looks like they can't take a joke. Oh, gosh, forbid. Oh, look at that. Nightshade, make sure you have a feminine divine being as pretty much the divinity that you look up to, not a masculine one. Do not have a masculine one. Have it be a feminine one, not a masculine. It has to be feminine because you have moon in the D24 or the how or the chart of religious studies, divinity. You need to have a female divinity, not a male one. Or even a water and divine being. But at the very least, it has to be a feminine. And it can be a moon one. Specifically, the way that I'm looking at this, I'm really saying make it be someone along the lines of Lilith, Chang'e, Isis, Hecate, Hera, Persephone, Mot, Nyx, Aradia, and Nithya. Ooh. Mm-hmm. Yeah, American Native too. Yeah, that's. I mean, I just recall the ones that just step forward off the top of my head. But definitely has to be one a, a goddess divine that is very has a lot of wisdom and is also has a lot of higher education too, or like very good at philosophical debates. What tribe? By any chance, does she know about Setna? Actually, Setna. Let me go get her. I'm not gonna go get her, but you get the idea. Actually, there's Chang'e. There's a second. There's Aradia, which is kind of the Roman equivalent of Hecate. There's Nyx. Both right there. There's Sedna. Because she's actually an American native divine from, I believe it's somewhere in Alaska. Alaskan native. But essentially, Sedna, what had happened is that her and her father went out fishing, and the boat pretty much almost like knocked her into the water off the boat, and she was holding on to the side of the. Yeah, so that's where pretty much kind of where Sedna could be from. And Sedna, being almost knocked off the boat, held on to the side of the boat for dear life. And for some reason, whatever reason her father decided, he took a shovel, and Sedna's holding on to the side of the boat to, pull herself up. Her father pretty much severs her fingers. So now, yeah, he cuts off her fingers holding onto the boat, and not being able to grab, she can't grab, and then she goes into the water, sinks, and dies of blood loss. But because of that, that's how the walruses and all the Arctic animals came to be, from her blood. And Sedna, because of that reason, is a goddess that's all about being abandoned, neglected, and abused for no reason. And it's a pretty sad tale because she never had thought that her father would do that. All for just for his own selfish gain, and he didn't want to actually have Sedna at all. So it's a very sad and drastic tale, but that goes to show you that sometimes mankind, when they're given the opportunity, they will actually just do what's malefic. And it's pretty sad. It's not right. How could you do that to your own daughter? It's just disgusting. And also, for some reason, I just got this hitting me in the head. Maybe even consider looking up Sedna. I actually have this thing, so it might help. And I don't know why I'm being pulled to read it, but okay. Essentially, it says the archetypal outcast of the Inuit. Rusty, didn't you say something about that? The Inuit origin? Hold on. Yes. Hello. Well, but still, if you have American Native, that one might be a good thing to possibly look into. Sedna was a beautiful maiden who was ostracized when it was believed she got impregnated by a wild animal. Her father took her out in the water to throw her overboard, but she clung to the side of the kayak so tightly that he cut off her fingers. They became sea creatures, and she was immortalized as a goddess of the sea, Sedna. It's pretty sad. And also having your father, take you out and then murder you because someone said she got pregnant by a walrus. How does that make sense? Yeah. I have. I also have British, Scottish, German, American Native, specifically Cherokee. Hold on. I have a phone call coming in. Hold on.